Have you ever felt like you're playing a game whose rules were written by someone who doesn't even know you? Most people live like this, trying to win in a system designed for them to lose. They follow ready-made strategies, generic advice, behavioral patterns that, in truth, only reinforce the position they're already in. And the worst part, they believe that with enough effort, one day the tide will turn. But what if the problem isn't a lack of effort, but the very game board they're playing on? This video is an invitation to see life with new eyes. Inspired by the provocative ideas in Predatory Thinking by Dave Trott, we'll explore how some creative, bold, and subversive minds not only learned to play better, but to completely change the game. The key isn't in having more strength or more logic. It's in having more imagination, more courage to break patterns, more presence to notice what no one else is seeing. Changing the game in your favor isn't about luck. It's a skill, a way of thinking, a new way to see problems, contexts, and yourself. You'll discover why the most brilliant solutions are often the simplest, and why thinking like a predator might be exactly what you need to stop being prey in a world that waits for no one. The game is on. Will you keep playing by someone else's rules? Most people see a problem as something fixed, a structure that needs to be knocked down with force or dismantled with logic. But the deepest conflicts in life rarely get solved this way. Have you ever tried arguing with someone who doesn't want to listen? Have you ever found yourself trying to win a debate that was never about reason, but about ego? In those moments, pushing harder is like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. What works in that scenario is something few people cultivate: imagination. We assume the only paths are the ones we've already seen. We replicate what we've been taught. But the ones who truly change the game are those who dare to see what no one else is seeing. That's how artists who revolutionized art did it. How entrepreneurs created markets where there was nothing. How leaders inspired crowds without shouting, just by pointing in a different direction. Creativity here is survival. It's the weapon of those who'd rather change the script than become another predictable character. Dave Trott defends the idea that you don't have to win within the rules. You can make new rules. An example of this can be seen in advertising campaigns that changed the market not because they were more expensive or more technical, but because they approached the problem from a different angle. They broke away from the obvious. They strayed from the expected. And that doesn't require a budget. It requires vision. To imagine is to anticipate. It's to see the real enemy where others see only obstacles. In daily life, this applies in brutally practical ways. Think about a tough conversation with someone you love. Instead of reacting the same way and waiting for the other person to change, what if you acted differently? What if you broke the pattern, said what you've never had the courage to say, or stayed silent when everyone expects an explosion? Emotional creativity is also this: escaping the pre-programmed emotional script. That's the essence of predatory thinking. It's not about attacking, it's about observing like a predator, patiently, with focus, with intelligence. While the prey runs in circles, reacting to what's happening, the predator waits for the right moment, finds the vulnerability, and acts with precision. In life, turning points rarely come to those too busy going with the flow. They happen to those who create a new curve, a new path. And that's why imagination isn't a luxury. It's what allows you to rewrite situations, flip expectations, create opportunities where others only see blocks. If you don't like the game, maybe it's time to design a new one. And the first tool won't be strength or logic. It'll be your ability to imagine an exit where no one else is looking. Think about that. That's how games are won before they even begin. Have you ever tried solving a problem over and over, changing strategies, advice, even your attitude, and yet everything stays the same? Maybe the mistake lies in trying to fix the piece when the flaw is actually in the setting where it was placed. This happens because most people see their conflicts as isolated, as if they were small glitches to be adjusted with effort. But the truth is, problems don't exist on their own. They live inside contexts. And it's the context that shapes behavior, distorts perceptions, and defines the limits of what's possible. Imagine a healthy plant placed in a small pot with poor soil and no light. It won't bloom, no matter how much it's watered. People are the same. Someone may have talent, intelligence, even drive. But if they live in an environment where they're constantly belittled, pressured, or ignored, they gradually begin to wilt. Because the problem was never just them, it was the pot. Dave Trott talks about creativity, but his idea goes beyond the creative mind. He shows that the way a problem is perceived depends on where you're looking from. In other words, it's not that the challenge is too big, it's that the point of view is too narrow. Changing the context, in this case, is like changing a camera lens. Suddenly, you see what was outside the frame, and that changes everything. In practice, this means that instead of trying to fix what's failing, it might be wiser to ask, where is this happening? With whom? Under what pressures? In what routines? Someone unhappy at work might be in the right place, but in the wrong role. Or in a toxic environment. A strained relationship might seem unsolvable until you change the pace of life, the habits, the spaces for conversation. And sometimes, silence suffocates simply because it exists in a context where everything needs to be said non-stop. When you change the environment, even silence gains new meaning. This principle also applies to the way we think. You can repeat a belief to yourself for years. I'm not good enough. Nothing works out for me, until, by immersing yourself in a new circle of people or a new project, something shifts. Not because the phrase disappeared from your mind, but because the environment no longer reinforces it. The previous context fed the doubt. The new context reveals a new version of you. So, before trying to beat the problem with more strength or dedication, ask yourself, what soil is this problem rooted in? If you keep trying to change it without touching the context, you're only trimming the leaves of a branch that keeps growing. But if you dare to transform the environment, you might realize the problem didn't need to be solved. It just needed to be repositioned. And then the game changes. A lot of people spend their lives waiting for the ideal moment, waiting to understand everything before taking action, waiting to be sure before taking a risk. But the game of life is rarely won by those who plan best. It's won by those who act first. The difference between a brilliant idea and a transformative one lies in the step that comes after the thought, execution. Dave Trott reminds us that creativity doesn't live in theory. It reveals itself in motion. It's not brainstorming that changes a situation. It's the act, often simple, of doing something no one else is doing. It's painting a square on the ground to divert the flow of a crowd. It's digging a hole in the street to force the city's attention. These are seemingly small actions that create big consequences. And they happen not because someone had a genius idea, but because someone had the courage to apply what they thought. Have you noticed how some people always seem to be preparing to start? They have plans for change, stacks of books, saved courses, written down ideas, but everything stays the same. Because thinking without acting is like daydreaming. And daydreaming, as beautiful as it seems, doesn't move the world. What changes reality is the concrete gesture, even if imperfect. In daily life, this is brutally visible. How many times does someone avoid talking to a loved one because they're waiting for the right time? How many decisions are postponed out of fear they're not fully ready? And time passes, relationships grow cold, opportunities are lost, clarity never comes, because clarity many times only appears after the movement. The road only reveals itself as you walk. That's why acting, even without guarantees, is an act of existential intelligence. It's in practice that we test what works. It's by stumbling that we find what truly matters. Planning is important, of course, but over-planning can be just a sophisticated way of avoiding risk. And those who avoid risk also avoid the possibility of change. The philosophy of doing has something visceral to it. It demands presence. It requires humility to fail, and it calls for a commitment to the now. Predatory thinking doesn't wait for the ideal scenario. It creates impact with what's at hand, where it is, because it understands the world isn't shaped by perfect ideas, but by consistent actions. Even if they fail, even if they're misunderstood, those actions create cracks in the game, and it's through those cracks that the new breaks in. So, if you want to change the game, start where you are with what you know, without waiting for applause, without needing a manual. Do it, try, adjust while in motion, because the world doesn't reward those who think best, it rewards those who dare to act. And in the end, it's always action that changes the narrative. It's what makes real what once was just a possibility. A child looks at the world with eyes that haven't yet learned to lie to themselves. They don't know what they can't do. They're not afraid of seeming naive. They're not bound by invisible conventions. And precisely because of this, they often see what no one else sees. There is an impressive strength in ignorance, not in passive unawareness, but in that pure form of not knowing that invites curiosity, genuine questions, and a fresh perspective. Dave Trott illustrates this with the story of a child who, upon seeing the family's phone bill, asks why someone would pay to talk to another person. The question seems silly until you realize there's a loophole there, a possibility, a real provocation. What seems obvious to an adult is, in fact, an invisible structure that limits creativity. The child, free from that, points out the flaw in the system without meaning to, and precisely because of that, with a precision no expert could achieve. In real life, this shows up when someone from outside an industry proposes a solution no one in the field had considered, or when a newcomer to a group notices dynamics that everyone else has already accepted as normal. Ignorance, in this case, is not a limitation. It's the freedom of not being addicted to patterns, of not carrying the weight of it's always been this way. How many times have you found yourself stuck on an idea simply because it made too much sense? Because it seemed logical, coherent, expected? And how many times have you ignored that seemingly absurd intuition that, if followed, could have changed everything? The adult mind learns to avoid the ridiculous, to run from doubt, to protect itself with certainties. But those certainties often become a prison. They form an invisible ceiling, and those who grow used to living under that ceiling forget that the sky exists. Predatory thinking, at this point, invites us to reclaim a kind of innocence. It's not about acting like a child, but about thinking like someone who has nothing to lose by asking a new question. It's about stepping out of the role of expert and into the role of the curious. It's about looking at an old problem as if it were the first time. This not only expands possibilities, it also disarms internal resistance. In everyday life, This can be practiced with something simple, asking why 5 times in a row about something you do automatically. Why do I need to reply to this message now? Why do I feel bad when I'm ignored? Why do I always take this route? By doing this, you strip away layer after layer of automated thinking, and at the core, you might find a different exit. Something that, deep down, was always there. Deconstructing inherited logic is an act that creates space for authentic solutions. When you stop assuming you know everything, you begin to see what truly matters. And at that moment, the game starts to change. Because now, you're not just reacting, you're rediscovering. Life, whether we like it or not, moves like a game of forces. And in this game, there are those who observe, plan, strike with precision, and those who only react. This isn't an aggressive metaphor, it's a raw description of reality. If you're not playing with intention, someone is playing with you. That's the essence of the predator mentality, taking radical ownership of your own existence. Dave Trott puts it plainly: if you're not trying to win, you're being beaten. There is no neutrality. And while that may sound harsh at first, it carries a liberating truth. Because if you're being outmaneuvered, deceived, or manipulated, it's not because the world is too cruel. It's because you haven't yet positioned yourself as a player. You're still waiting for the game to be fair, but it never was. The prey mentality shows up in phrases like, "I have no choice. It's not up to me. I'll wait and see what happens." These are subtle ways of giving up power. They're the excuses of passivity, and they create a cycle. The more you wait, the more you lose. The more you hesitate, the more someone else makes decisions for you. And the most dangerous thing is that this mentality disguises itself as prudence, humility, even spirituality, when in truth, it's fear of acting. The predator mentality isn't about dominating others. It's about refusing to be dominated by yourself. It's about observing your own patterns, emotional habits, repetitive cycles, and having the courage to intervene. Not with violence, with clarity. A predator doesn't panic. They choose the right moment. They act with purpose. They anticipate. They lead. In everyday life, this translates into small shifts. Instead of waiting for your partner to change, you communicate what you need. Instead of accepting a routine that makes you sick, you start sketching an alternative, even if no one around understands. Instead of complaining about a lack of opportunities, you create one. And yes, sometimes that requires discomfort. But living as prey demands something worse: resignation. The key is understanding that the difference between the two isn't strength, it's posture. A prey can be intelligent, sensitive, creative, but if they don't move with intention, they end up serving someone else's game. The predator, on the other hand, is the one who wakes up to the fact that life demands hard choices, and that running from them only prolongs the pain. Changing the game in your favor starts right here, by quitting the wait. Stop waiting to be chosen, to be noticed, to be rescued. Start choosing yourself, seeing yourself, positioning yourself. When you do that, you don't become immune to life's blows, but you become capable of responding to them, with presence, with strategy, with will. And then, for the first time, you're no longer just surviving, you're playing, for real. At some point in life, we all find ourselves placed in the middle of a game already in motion. The pieces are set, the rules seem fixed, and instinct tells us, play like everyone else, survive. But there's a moment when something inside us questions, what if I don't want to play this game anymore? That moment is rare, because it takes courage to dismantle certainties, to stop blaming the world, luck, or others, and accept that. Even without total control, we still have the power to change the way we exist, the way we think, the way we act. That's where repositioning begins. Not with shouting, not with revolt, but with the intimate decision to no longer be a piece, to be a player, or more than that, to be the one who draws the new board. The truth is, the world doesn't bow to beautiful intentions. It responds to clarity, to movement, to the boldness of doing things differently, even when everything says it won't work. And that power doesn't belong to a few. It belongs to anyone who dares to access it. So, before going to sleep tonight, observe, question. Where are you accepting to play a game that has already lost its meaning? And what, even if small, can you do tomorrow that goes in the opposite direction? Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for certainty. The world already has too many rules. Now it's your turn to create a new one and live up to it. If you enjoyed this content and want to explore life's deeper questions, subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who is also among the awakened.